Hey, everybody, welcome to The Wrong End of the Snake. It's a webcast about audio, touring, and the relationships we have built between our road families. Tater and I have had an 18-year relationship on The Wrong End of the Snake with bands like Ted Nugent, Kid Rock, Slash, Stone Temple Pilots, Prophets of Rage, Iron Maiden, and most notably 10 years as front of house and monitor mixers for Linkin Park. My co-host, Kevin Tater McCarthy, is a world-class monitor engineer with over 30 years in the business. I'm very proud to call him my friend. He has 8 Top Dog Monitor Engineer of the Year awards and 2 Parnelli Monitor Engineer of the Year awards. I am Ken Van Druten, aka Pooch. I am a front of house engineer with 3 decades in the music industry. I'm a 3-time Grammy-nominated recording engineer. I have 8 Top Dog Front of House Engineer of the Year awards, and I'm also a winner of the Parnelli Front of House Engineer of the Year award. Let's do a little housekeeping. Please use the chat window of our Zoom app to communicate amongst yourselves. If you're streaming from our YouTube channel and you want to be able to ask questions of our guests, register to be on the Zoom call for future episodes. Links to register are in all of our social media. If you have any questions for our guests, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom app. We will answer as many questions as possible during the hour, and then answer any leftover questions in our Q&A overtime episode. Look for that to be uploaded to our YouTube channel in a few days. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't forget to visit our social media. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is at Wrong End of the Snake. Tater, why don't you tell us about the guests this week?
All right. Today we have the legendary Jerry Harvey. Legendary. We all know Jerry's an innovator, monitor engineer, and entrepreneur. His in-ear monitors took over the industry, starting with the Ultimate Ears brand. And for the last 10 years, his own company, JH Audio. Known for their exceptional sound quality by touring musicians, crew, and audiophiles worldwide. He continues to dominate the market in the pro IEMs. As a monitor mixer, he mixed legendary bands like Van Halen, Kiss, Motley Crue, David Lee Roth, Katie Lang, Morissey, The Cult, and even Linkin Park. Let's please welcome. We're so happy to have him here today. So much information is going to be learned. Jerry Harvey.
Hey, Jerry. Welcome.
Alrighty.
Hey guys, how are you? Thanks for having me.
We're doing okay, man. We're surviving in this this weird time. But we're so happy that you took some time out of your busy schedule, I'm sure, to get with us and talk a little bit about your past, because you're one of my favorite friends to talk about that has some great stories about where you came from and, you know, your journey, because your journey's just been crazy. Not only as a monitor engineer, but also your business journey in all of the ventures that you've done over the years. So let's kind of just get into it, and tell where did you grow up and where did this all start?
Well, first of all, I'm going to do a little house cleaning. I was on Motley, but I was a systems tech. That's the only one I wasn't a monitor engineer on.
Oh, I got that wrong.
I actually got to mix Cheap Trick front of house. The only time I ever mixed any front of house gigs on a VDOS rig. And it was like, I remember seeing, I'm from St. Louis, by the way, so I born and raised. I remember seeing Cheap Trick at Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis, and all I heard was guitar and bass rig. I couldn't hear Robin Zander's vocal. So I remember the house lights went down. I was with a gentleman, Davey Kirkwood, who you guys all know.
Oh, yeah.
And I just remember like a deer in the headlight. I was like so afraid, like all these people cheered, and I'm so used to being on the side of the deck, right? So we get going, and I put Robin Zander's vocal right up on top where I always wanted to hear it. But it was the only other thing, and you'll appreciate this, Pooch, and maybe you will too, Tater, is that from doing wedges and side fills, I kept trying to get the PA to like hit me right here, So the first 40 rows are probably peeled their face back, But anyway,
you're trying to do brain dart front of house mixing, were you?
So that was my one and only time as a front of house guy in the big league. Yeah. So anyway, I grew up in St. Louis and came up through the club ranks, mixing the local bands and stepping up from the little corner bands to kind of the regional bands. I worked, I worked for probably 10 years in the clubs there and got to be like, I was always a front of house guy. And believe it or not, my brother Bobby was always my monitor guy, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. And then I know I want to fast forward a little bit just because, you have such a story that we have so many things to get to. I know that tell us a little bit. I know there's a history, something about Sammy Hagar and him using your Trans Am or something. Like what happened with that? You told me a story once about that.
Oh yeah, there's actually two stories that kind of weaves, Van Halen in my life. So 1980 Super Jam, Sammy Hagar was headlining Busch Stadium, right? It was Journey, Judas Priest. I mean, it was a stadium, and he was the headliner, right? Because everybody loved Sammy because KC Radio pushed the hell out of him there ever since Montrose, right? But so I'm driving. I'm a little South City kid, I'm 18 years old. I'm driving my red Trans Am down, South Grand Avenue, and I get pulled over by this guy. End up being John Schmeemeyer, who was a promoter rep for Contemporary for years. So you probably guys know him.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Hey, I need a car for Sammy Hagar to drive this Saturday out onto the stage, at Busch Stadium." I'm like, "Get out of here!" I go, "Who are you, man?" I said, "Leave me alone." So I shoot him away. He goes, "No," and he gave me his card. So basically, me and my little girlfriend Patty, we showed up at Busch Stadium, and I had my car all washed up, and I got to meet Sammy for like 30 seconds, right? Like Sammy, just kind of shook my hand and kind of gave me the beat it kid thing,
Right,
I was
right.
like, "Oh, Mr. Hagar, you're driving my car." He's like, "Yeah, thanks, kid." And I beat it. Right. So anyway, so he drives my car, and there was black Trans Am, and they go, tearing around the stadium, and that was it. I got backstage passes for the first time in my life, and then met Schmeemeyer, and I became a runner for Schmeemeyer for a little while after that.
Wow.
Great
what a trip,
story.
man.
Yeah.
And all the while you're mixing stuff like in clubs and that kind of stuff. And then there's one other kind of famous story that I remember you telling me about how you actually met David Lee Roth, right?
Oh yeah.
Didn't you meet him in a bar? It wasn't like you got hired to mix for him or something.
It was crazy. Well, it's kind of a crazy story because my first trip to LA was with a band called King Cobra. And I went with the bass player, right?
Sweet.
Johnny Rod, who was a nutcase. But
was that not did they not all have like blonde hair and one guy had black hair or something?
Yeah, Carmine had black hair, and the
Carmine,
rest,
right,
they were the inverse of Motley Crue. That's what
Yeah.
that was Carmine's plan, right? I love Carmine.
Awesome.
But
The inverse.
so went there, and that didn't work out, and I came home. But I met a guy named Andre McDougal, right? And Andre McDougal was the drum tech for Carmine, and he ended up being Greg Bissonette's drum tech. So anyway, I'm going to back up. So I come back from Los Angeles, and I'm like, I'm giving up on music. I'm just going to paint cars because I could paint cars and I could mix it, or probably painted cars better than I mix actually. But anyway, so we go see 1984 concert, right? And there's 2 nights at the arena in St. Louis. And so we go to the first show, and it's me and my girlfriend, Yana. Oh my Lord. Anyway, so after the show, we go to a place called The Landing, Bogart's on the Landing.
Oh yeah.
A little L-shaped bar. So we're right at the entrance. And then we're sitting there after the concert having a couple drinks. And I look to my left, and David Lee Roth sits down right next to me. And it was Eddie Anderson. I didn't know him then. I've come to know him. And Dave and I spoke for like 45 minutes about martial arts and stretching. And I just remember, I was like, "How do you get so flexible?" He goes, "Oh, I put on Huey Lewis, I smoke a joint, and I stretched for the whole length of the album." I was like, "Oh, that's pretty good," So, 18 months later, I'm working for Dave. It just was a really weird thing. And then I'm going to tell the Sammy story. We were at Riverport on Balance in 95, and we just finished sound check in St. Louis, and Sammy never knew he drove my car the whole time I worked for Van Halen, right? So we're sitting there, and I go, "Hey, Sammy," I go, "Do you remember, Super Jam 1980, the red Trans Am?" He goes, "Yeah, man." He goes, and he totally gets into it. It's like the first time I ever had a stadium, I drove this red Trans Am out. I go, "Yeah, it was my Trans Am." He goes, "You used to own a red Trans Am?" I go, "No, dude, you drove my Trans Am out in 1980. So it was like such a small world, right? He's like, "Get out of here." I go, "No, straight up, dude. It was my car." He's like, "Wow." Anyway,
So what I just want to know, did you get the gig working with David because you met him in that bar, or did you get the gig some other way and then made that connection later?
Totally random.
Wow.
Dave never, he to this day, he never remembers meeting me. But so Andre was a drum tech for Carmine Appice, became Greg Bissonette's drum tech.
Right.
And when Dave left Van Halen, he had to move all of his, they had his office in Sunset Boulevard. So David bought a house in West Hollywood, and Andre goes, hey, this guy, Patrick Whitley, needs a bunch of help to move. And who's like Dave's production manager and, invented a rolling stage, all that stuff, legendary. I didn't know who he was, because we need some bodies to move the office stuff, over to this house. You in? I go, yeah, I needed to work. And I knew it was David Lee Roth, and I was homeless at Mates, sleeping on the couch in Studio B. So I wanted a tour or something, so I worked real hard. And at the end of the day, there were these fire safes, they're like 12 huge, heavy fire safes that had to come down from the second floor. And all the other guys, that actually already worked for Whitley said, well, let's come back and get it tomorrow. And they left. And Whitley looks at me and goes, what do you want to do? I go, let's put these damn things in a truck. So he and I humped them down, put him in the back of the Ryder truck, put him in there. And when we're closing up the truck, he goes, what do you do? I go, I'm a sound guy. He goes, well, I don't need a sound guy. He goes, but do you know how to tune a bass guitar? I didn't know how to tune a bass guitar. I go, absolutely, I know how to tune a bass guitar.
Of course you said yes.
Dude, I've been tuning bass guitar since I was a kid. Yeah, absolutely.
Of course.
He goes, well, Monday we're going to start rehearsals at Perkins Palace in Pasadena. Be there. And he goes, you'll be the bass tech. You're going to help me put down, you'll be a flooring. You're going to help get the gear in and out. So basically I was just like a jack of all trades,
Wow, that's intense. I had a similar experience with Patrick Whitley. I got hired to be the front of house guy for Kiss. Toby was already there, and then Toby left and kind of placed me in that position. But no one told me how legendary Patrick was. This was, oh God, I don't know, 96, right? Or 97.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know his history or whatever, but
Just
as I
the
started
name from the albums, that's
yeah,
all.
I know. As I started finding out, I was like, holy crap, dude, this guy's been around for, he's pretty legendary and does some amazing things. But since we've become very good friends and, he's a good dude.
Yeah. And he had that look that he would give you that look. You're like, okay. I
Okay.
understand completely.
So
he was of that old school production manager, expected you, if he didn't care that you were sound guy, you were going to build barricade that day. You know what I mean? It's like whatever it took. And I kind of like that, I think some of that has been lost in this industry a little bit.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm taking it was the Eat 'em and Smile tour you were talking about here, right?
It was right after Eat 'em and Smile.
Right after.
Before Skyscraper. Yeah.
Oh, so that was his first. That was his first outing then.
That was his second outing, Skyscraper. He'd already done Eat 'em and Smile. And I came in right at the end, right as everything was wrapping up, and then they were doing production rehearsals for Skyscraper.
So who was doing front of house and monitors then?
Gunji and
Gunji.
Spragoo.
Yep.
And Spragoo. Wow, there's a team. I love that.
And obviously a Tasco account back then, right?
Definitely a Tasco account. Yep. Transatlantic Sound Company.
Wow.
Oh, I thought it was Try Another Sound Company. Okay,
That was their second. That was the other one. Yeah, that was the alternate.
That was the alternate name.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, in case you guys don't know, if you don't know who those legendary guys are, Spragoo, he works for Sound Image in San Diego now, but as the legendary monitor mixer for Aerosmith and for Rage Against the Machine and
Motley.
Kiss. Yeah.
every major band that we've been talking about. So
In their heyday.
In their heyday. Yeah. Exactly. And then of course Gunji, amazing mixer. If you didn't get to listen to him mix, I mean, I was a kid when he was in his heyday, and I was always mixing the opening act, some little tiny act that had barely any room left on the stage, and he would be the headliner guy, and he was always very very nice to me and always, showing me stuff, and I'm very grateful to him. He's no longer with us, but
very kind gentleman. Yeah,
Great.
5'22", he would tell me.
Yeah.
How tall are you? He's at 5'22". He's 7 foot tall, right?
Yeah, the great story about him is that literally, like in European buses, they would cut the wall of the bus so that he could be long enough. He was like 6'5" I think, or 6'6". I mean,
No,
he was like,
he was 6'11".
Yeah,
Oh
6'11".
He was
Yeah,
almost 7 foot tall.
one shy of 7.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So he'd put his feet in the other bunk halfway down, you know.
He'd cut a hole in the bunk so that his feet could go.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, good times. So help us to figure out how you ended up doing in-ears. Like, where did that start? It started with Van Halen, right?
Yeah, it started, well, you know, when In-Ears came out, I was doing Engelbert Humperdinck. I would go between Van Halen. When they were off the road, I would do Engelbert Humperdinck. And they had a set of Future Sonics and a Garwood radio station. And I did 4 shows with him, and that made me an in-ear monitor expert, right? So, and I got
That's all it
hired
took back then.
Yeah, that's all it took back then, because nobody ever mixed ears before, right? So then I get hired for the Van Halen gig as an in-ear expert because they wanted to put Alex on ears. And so we have radio stations set up. That was even before there were no hardwires out at that point in time. The only option you had were wireless radio station, Garwoods, you know. And they sounded like, remember, they sounded like a waterfall was running in it. There's like, they had this pink noise that was always there.
Always there. Yeah.
Always there, right?
2 channels, 2 frequency channels too.
Exactly. Yeah. A-B. So then, you know, Alex and I didn't have the relationship that we have now. Back then I was brand new and I was just, you know, monitor guy number whatever, you know. So
right.
We're doing rehearsals, and I have him fitted with the 2 companies back then that were still there, the Future Sonics from Marty and Sensophonics from Michael. And what you have to realize is that no one was really putting any interest into the actual delivery system. They were worried about the hardware, how it transmitted, how it received, all of these
And
things.
feedback. Remember back then, everybody's worried about
everybody's
feedback.
afraid there's going to be feedback. Yeah. But so, you know, just it was the law of rising expectations. If you heard yourself clearly for the first time in this loud environment, you thought it was amazing. But as you started listening to it, you realized that a single dynamic speaker or a single balanced armature didn't have the frequency response, you know, the headroom, the dynamic range. It was just very, very small sound. So you're talking, you know, about Alex, who's always had Eddie's guitar rig, a speaker next to him, huge side fills, you know. So when he put these little earpieces in, he just was very anticlimactic for him, right? And I give him the first set, and he starts playing his drums, and he kind of looks at me and keeps playing, and he kind of gets this frown, and he stops and he goes, yeah, these aren't going to work. He goes, you know, these things sound horrible. He goes, is it your mixing? Do you not know what you're doing over there?
Ooh.
And I'm like, all right, I was always taught never blame the gear, right?
Yep.
I was like, well, let me try another set for you. So I give him the other set, and he plays like 4 beats and goes, oh, these are even worse than the other ones. He goes, and he's like, I know we have to do this. And he goes, I understand it, because he goes, if you're going to be my monitor guy, you have to find something that's going to work. Something's got to work better than this. He goes, so we'll go with this until you find something better. And that's what started me down the path of trying to build an in-ear monitor that would make Alex happy, you know?
Wow, that's crazy. So what happened? Were you like, you know, trying to build stuff like in the back lounge? Like what? Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, you guys all know Fumi. Fumi was, you know, Fumi was my Japanese. He would, you know, source stuff from Japan for me because he spoke Japanese. So I started trying to find all these little miniature drivers and stuff, and ended up finding the balanced armatures, and, you know, and found, I always had the high driver that was okay, but I could never find a low driver. And this guy, Rick Zanardo, that was with Knowles, said, hey, I found this balanced armature. It's huge. He says, it's in the balanced armature graveyard. He goes, they used to put it inside people's chest for their pacemaker to let them know that it would emit a tone, 140 decibels.
Oh, wow.
That way it could tell you you were about ready to, you know, I'm going to
get shocked.
Yeah. So have a seat, right?
Yeah.
So, and I tested this thing, and the damn thing was a perfect low end driver with a low pass at 4K that I couldn't have planned any better, right? So threw me a little 2.2 cap in there, and the UE5 was born, you know? So, and then I remember taking them to, and the thing is I'm doing all of this. That's when West Tone was doing all my molds for me, right? And I had made the faceplate I had little screws so I could take them off because I was constantly blowing them up. And I just remember learning in real time about how the dampers got sweat on and would shut off, because I'm up there with front of 14,000 people while Alex is playing, getting swatted at with a drumstick, trying to change earpieces out, twice during the night because it was failing. And so anyway, so I made the 5, and that was the first time he ever smiled at me, right? So we start sound checking. He smiles. I go, I got it, right?
Okay, I got you now.
Yeah, I got it. And then by that time, I don't know. There was about a 4-month period. I don't know how many times I was sitting in catering with a soldering iron as they were line checking for me, trying to get a set of earpieces to work for the show. I mean,
wow.
Typically, like literally losing, that's why I have all these bald spots, probably like losing my hair at an early age, going, if this thing doesn't work, he's not going to be able to play, So it was a lot of, I learned so much, and, it was really good to do it in that environment. It was stupid. Like I would never do that now, but it was instant feedback from the artist, and he could tell me, how the seal wasn't working, or, hey, this thing's sweating out. We got to, how to move the damper up inside the earpiece. So like, it was like a crash course in like designing a product to make it work. And cause Alex sweated so bad, you know? So anyway, it was Alex Van Halen that definitely was my R&D, and, as patient as Alex can be, patient enough with me to get through the process, and, rest is history,
Wow.
That's fantastic story.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that we should point out here, that you didn't give up, right? Like a lot of us would have been like, shit, man, I just can't make this happen or whatever. You were just like, nope, we're going to keep doing this. And luckily you had a guy that was, willing to kind of play along with you. I mean, I think that's an important thing. There's an art that's been lost, especially in this industry. When I was a kid, we never said no. And we never said, oh, I don't know how to do that. You always said, I know how to do that. And then, you figured it out. I mean, I can't tell you how many times where someone would say to me, hey, go over there and adjust that thing and turn the, whatever. And I'd say, oh yeah, I know how to do it. And I'd go over there. And then I'd be like, does anybody have the manual for this thing? I gotta,
yeah, you couldn't Google, forward. You couldn't download the manual then.
No, you couldn't,
And if you fast forward, God, I don't know, 25 years later, we brought you back into Linkin Park because Mike wanted something different than anybody else wanted. And obviously JH delivered as always. You personally came and figured it out and delivered. And I think you still, to this day, in your generic, use some of the things you learned then with Mike, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, we my whole goal, has always been to try to solve a problem for an artist, whatever it might be, I've made some pretty crazy things over the years that have actually worked, and but you just have to think out of the box.
I think that you've always been really good at the technical side of it, like figuring it out. Okay, this is why I need this to have more drivers because I got to have low end or, whatever it is. But tell us a little bit about the business side and like, how did you learn that? Or did you just fumble through it? Or was there someone that helped you along the way? Like, let's say for Ultimate Ears, for example, the first start of your career.
Ultimate Ears was the business success behind Ultimate Ears was Mindy Harvey.
Okay.
Because she was corporate trained, she was hard nosed. I mean, we called her the buzzsaw at Ultimate Ears. I mean, she didn't mess around, and her and I had opposing views on sometimes, because I gave things away that she didn't want to give away. But no, she was the brains behind Ultimate Ears as far as, and I learned a lot from her, and it was because it was kind of scary. I was on Van Halen. I was a touring sound engineer. Skid Row was the opening act, and they were using single armature earpieces. They were struggling, didn't have enough gain, and they saw that Alex was happy. So I don't even remember who the production manager was. Says, hey, we need these for Skid Row. Do you mind making them? And I hadn't even thought about a company. I just had thought that I just wanted to make Alex happy.
Right.
I was like, yeah. I said, I'll make you guys 5 pair. And he said, okay. So, got their impressions. Fumi and I soldered them together, you know, and everything, and they worked, and went in and they did sound check with them. And I went into the production office, and the tour manager's like, okay, well, how much I owe you? And I was like,
100 grand.
$200 million.
$600 a piece. He's like,
Wow.
and he gave me $3,000 in cash. I remember walking out
Wow.
of the production office going, you know, I think this is much easier than mixing for a living.
So Skid Row was actually the first UE client, really, right?
They were opening up for Van Halen. Yeah. On
Wow.
balance, yeah.
How
So then,
was, you know, those were basically kind of prototype things. You guys were building them on the side there. How long did they last? Like, were you having to rebuild stuff like every few shows, or did they like right away? They kind of lasted a long time.
by the time we got to that point, we'd already went through all the R&D of figuring out where to put the filters. And by that time they were a reliable piece. You know, they'd already been beat up by Alex and would make it through a show or 2 shows, 3 shows, you know, so, and then I remember Mindy was working for Canon, you know, Canon copiers. And I came home from tour on a break. She goes, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to run Ultimate Ears. I was like, we've sold 5 earpieces. What do you mean you're going to quit your job? Are you out of your mind, woman? You're my stability.
My tour is over and you quit your job. Great.
But that's amazing that she saw the vision, right?
Yeah.
She saw that and was like, okay, I know this is going to be something. And she believed in you enough to, you know.
Yeah,
to say that.
she was instrumental. Like I said, we were a team, you know. What wouldn't have happened without her. It wouldn't have happened without me.
So let's get into this for a second, because I know a lot of the younger people don't realize that you started Ultimate Ears, and not only started Ultimate Ears, you were instrumental in even Westone getting started to some extent, because they weren't building earpieces at the time, and they were your lab before you had a lab at Ultimate Ears. Is that correct?
That's correct. They had built a couple little single armature pieces, I think for Def Leppard or something in the very early days. But there's a guy named Carl Cartwright there that, you know, I called him and I said, listen, I want to make some earpieces. I'm with Van Halen. So because I was with Van Halen, the door opened, you know, and they basically did all the molds for me. Then I did all the audio design. And then Carl and I collaborated on the 5 a bit. You know, he did the math so we could figure out what capacitor to have. That was before you had a computer, you could figure it out, right? But we started, you know, Westone was our lab from 1995 until 2000. So basically all Mindy and I did was, you know, I designed the product, Westone built and shipped the product. Mindy did the business side of it. And I was on the, you know, fighting bus drivers and truck drivers at the truck dock for the payphone, trying to grow my empire. Right.
Wow. That's amazing.
That's right. Yep.
Yep. No cell phones.
I remember having to like cycle through the truck drivers and the bus drivers trying to, you know, call Shure and cold call them and go, hey, I can build this earpiece for this new thing I hear you're building, you know?
Wow. That is crazy.
Such a great story.
I remember, you know, I had a set of Westones, I think, that were prior to Ultimate Ears. And I remember them being horrible. But I knew that, you know, as soon as I think I had, my first pair was 7s. I don't think I had 5s, but, and I just remember being, you know, I'm a front of house guy. I'm not really a monitor guy. At that time, though, I was mixing monitors during that time. And I mixed Pantera, who didn't use in-ears, but I used Ultimate Ear 7s because the stage was so loud. I wanted to be closed off to listen to my mixes, because I had a you know, a Q wedge that was like on stun, and I was literally like blowing up my hearing. Yeah.
Putting it on a case to get it right next to your
Totally.
head.
It was on a case next to me, you know.
Make sure you get all the damage possible.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so even though none of those guys wore ears, I wore ears to protect myself and be able to hear these mixes. So thanks for that. They were amazing.
Well, you're welcome. The 7 was the predecessor, you know, followed the 5. So the 5 was in 95, and I designed the 7 in 98 because bands I needed something really loud. So, and to this day, the 7 still has the hottest input sensitivity of anything I've ever built. I think like 124 dB at a milliwatt or something like that. It's like stunning. Like
I know for the longest
Ridiculous.
time it took me, and it does ever actually with all the years, it took me the longest time to move out of that 7 to the next set that I used after that, which I think was the 13 actually.
Yeah.
So it was a few sets away when I finally did switch. I just loved those 7s, and they worked for all the artists I was doing. It was just a great earpiece.
You know what's crazy is even though that earpiece was built and designed in '98, to this day there are still people that will not go out without a 7. I just got off the phone 2 days ago with Sully. You did Godsmack.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He's
yeah.
like, he's tried everything. He's nope, 7's the only way to go, and he sells the 7s. He tells all these kids how great the 7 is. I'm like, dude, I haven't made the 7, so now I have to start. We're putting it back on the website. We're going to start making the 7 again. But
that's fantastic.
Fantastic. Reverse engineering.
Yeah.
What you have to realize is that 7 has been in every pop star's head. It was an industry standard at Ultimate Ears for years. I mean,
especially back then, there wasn't a ton of models to choose from either. There was only a few.
5,
so
7 Sensophonics or Future Sonic. Was now there's 3,000 companies, but back then there was 3.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy, man. Yeah, it was. It was certainly life-changing for a bunch of people. Tell us, nowadays, I don't want to fast forward too far, but nowadays it feels like you're creating a bunch of boutique specific in-ears for different things. Like you have an ear that is focused for guitar players I remember when I was working for Motley Crue only a few years ago, probably, I don't know, when I say a few years ago, it might've been 10 years ago, but, and you built a special custom low end something for Tommy, right?
Yeah.
I was there when that happened. But you are like the king of figuring out, hey, this is what guitar players need. This is what drummers need. This is what vocalists need, et cetera, et cetera. Tell us how that came about.
Well, my concept or my approach was always that any earpiece should be able to do any job for anybody on the deck, right? But then there's a few people that need special things, like singers. Some of them prefer they have a vocal plateau, like a 1K to 5K, like a plateau, 5 or 6 dB high. It brings that vocal out, right? So that's what the Angie was. The Angie was basically for someone that wanted a very flat bottom end and their vocal on top, right? Then the Roxanne was obviously like a big rock PA, right? And it's pretty much the industry standard now.
Yeah.
And then I started, 2005, I did the first hybrid, which was, I took a dynamic speaker for lows and a balanced armature for highs, and that was with Ultimate Ears. And then I got away from it for a while. And then I worked with Slash, and I found out that the dynamics actually do low mids all the way up to 5K better than they do low end. So what I found out was that these dynamics, I used two 4.9 dynamics facing each other, right? So we had 10 millimeters of cone basically. And what I found out is if you put a 57 in front of a Marshall cabinet and you listen to the mid drivers in those Lolas, it sounded just like the Marshall because the dynamics had the same sympathetic distortion that the speaker and the microphone had. And then I added some balanced armatures for bottom end and, balanced armature for high, and went back and forth probably 6 or 7 different iterations. And then Slash, he won't play without them. He was on Roxanne's and he loved it. He says, but it sounded like his guitar. He said, but the Lolas really sounded like his guitar, right? So they're kind of a guitar player piece, right? So those are the two pieces that actually are kind of one's directed at vocals, the Angie, the other's directed kind of at guitar players because of the mid-range tonality.
And you actually were looking at the harmonic distortion part of that and saying that, this is the resonance of the harmonic distortion that happens with a guitar. I'm going to try to recreate that in connected to people's hearing, which is interesting to me. Did you ever do in all of your research, Have you gone back and been like, oh, I need to, study about audiology and study about the human ear and all this kind of stuff? Because it sounds like in the beginning you were, throwing darts in the dark and trying to get it to work, right? So nowadays, have you found an interest in that kind of stuff, or are you still coming from being a monitor mixer kind of perspective?
I'm still coming from being a sound guy, a monitor mixer, a systems engineer on how I tune things. I learned enough in the early days. The West Tone guys were very good at explaining head resonance and a lot of things that happen in the ear and fit. So I think that's the one thing that young monitor guys need to really know about is the head resonance. Like when you put your fingers in your ear, you have nothing but low mids boosted. Like right now, I've got these earpieces in and all I can hear, because I have no side tone coming back, all I can hear is my head resonance, right? So what people have typically done is they basically just turn the microphone up and get over the head resonance, which you're actually setting quite a loud volume for your pop star, right? So what I've always done is I've basically high passed the guy's vocal to 400 hertz or the lady's vocal to 400, 500 hertz, had them turn up the belt pack to where the earpiece and the head resonance kind of blends together and then mixed from there, And I was always really, I always would match, wide channels in the old days before it was digital. And that way I had one of the singer's vocal would be able to go without the high pass to the rest of the band. But every time they would be singing to themselves, I always had a dedicated channel that high passed to whoever was singing, and when it went back to them. So if I had 4 vocal mics, I had 8 channels, 4 to put around the stage that were not high passed, they're above 100 hertz or something, and the others that were back to the artist that were 500 hertz high passed, right? So you really have to know what head resonance does to a vocal mic and the clarity that that your artist needs.
I can't say enough about that. I mean, all my vocal mics for the wedges have been 160 for years, or right somewhere in that area. And I on an ear, depending who it is, people look at my EQ and go, "What's going on?" But man, I high pass up to 500. You know what I mean? And that, to me, that's what it takes for that head resonance. I've been doing that, forever. And that's just what's always worked for me. And I get people looking at my stuff going, "Whoa, geez, what are you doing?" But I don't know. That's what works. Can't tell you that, but that knob there is where it works for the in-ears and that guy's head, So, I don't know all the other mechanics around it, but, I can't say enough about that high pass filter doing that.
Yeah.
So,
it's a very simple thing, and the other thing as a monitor guy, and I'm sure you are the same, I used to always laugh. I said, I never do anything below 200 hertz, right? Because my whole deck was like 160, because I knew that the front of house guy was going to yell at me if I had a bunch of stuff.
I'm doing all that.
You got plenty. Like, I remember, how many times have you guys ever been doing a sound check and the band goes, "Turn the PA off." And they turn the PA off and it gets real small and thin. And they're like, "It sounds like shit with the PA off." I'm like, "Can I ask you a quick question? Are you playing with the PA on or off?"
Does that ever happen? Yes. Does that ever happen?
Using that front
Not
of
on
house
purpose.
sound to
Not
help
on purpose.
Yeah, you got to use the front of house to help you. Especially they hear all that low end and stuff, and then they figure out it's not you. And I go, "Geez, I don't even have any subs on the stage. I can't be creating that." You know what I mean? My 16, 12-inch speakers up here aren't doing that.
Well,
I always tell people that the best monitor engineers in this business are the guys that understand exactly what you're describing, how to utilize the front of house in order to make their stuff work.
Yeah, it's one system.
Got to be.
The other thing is
one sound moving forward.
As you and Tater have the relationship, like I worked with Greg Price in my early career for years, and you get to where and I worked with Oris Henry, and Jakubowski, but you get this relationship between the front of house and the monitor thing, because the front of house engineer can't hear what's coming off the back of the PA, right? And what the pop star is going to be affected by. Like there's a 630 or 500 thing coming off the back of the PA. I'll do like an oscillator with my voice so you can hear it. We find that, and I go down and do the 200 and we clean it up. And it doesn't make as much difference in the front of house as per se what's coming off the back of the PA system. And, but that's a good relationship between a front of house guy that, because there's nothing that a front of house guy hates worse than watching that knowing that they see the intercom light up. It's like, hey,
the monitor
hey.
salute.
Can you just
that guy?
Can you turn some sub bass down for me? Because my pop star's killing me up here,
I think with me and Pooch, it's great you bring that up. I think, we work with mainly bands that don't sound check, but that's the one thing we're at a festival. The one thing we always make sure we do is always walk that vocal mic and check that is the number one thing. If we have zero time, that's the one thing we don't give the okay until that's done.
No, you have to. Yeah.
Now, have you guys found, I mean, from my perspective, speaker technology has improved so much, like even in the last 5 years, there's not so much of that crap as blowing backwards as much. Is that changed the way that you guys mix as monitor guys? A little bit. I mean, do you find yourself that as you're backing off on some high pass filters or whatever because I'm not giving it to you anymore?
Well, the only band that I've mixed recently was, 15. I mixed the Van Halen guys again, right? But
yeah.
And you've been around the Van Halen camp. You don't need anything below 200 hertz anywhere.
No,
those guys,
don't.
They don't want to hear
rock band
60 hertz. They don't even want to hear 60.
They don't
hertz,
even
right?
want
so
it. No,
for me, it hasn't really done anything, but actually cleaned up the stage for me because the problem also I would have with like Alex and drummers is that they're sitting in the center of the stage, 25 feet back on the deck, and they're in that where that lobe, where everything rolls up. So you get that plus 6 dB, all this, the omnidirection of the sub, everything builds up right there. So, you cannot, for Alex, he doesn't like to feel that low end. There's no way that you can get rid of, even with the cardio subs, you can still feel it back there, So for him, I mean, I'd have him high passed even on his ear mix, 200 hertz, 250 hertz to try to offset that. I was like, hey, how about we just move your drum riser to like 5 feet to the right?
Just a little bit over here.
No, I'm in the center. I'm like, all right, fair enough.
It's real funny. And it must have come from when they were listening to music younger as kids, that any band that I work for, which is a majority that started in the 70s, right? Man, they're all like that. They don't want that sub bass and, and they call it bass or sub, whatever they call it. They all have a different name for it, the low end, but they don't want that sub bass at all.
It's Led Zeppelin, man.
Yeah,
it's a challenge.
Yeah,
it's a challenge for a house guy now. For me, I mix Iron Maiden now, and they don't want that either up there. But it still has to be out in the front, right? Like you can't have not a full frequency wide mix. If you get rid of that information out front, then it makes your mix feel like this big and overemphasized and all the high end, and people start, it's brutal, even at lower volumes. You have to use all those frequencies and figure out a way to not splash it back on the stage. It's one of the hardest things to work for a legacy act for sure.
Yeah. Like I remember a couple months ago, I sent Alex a track. It was John Bonham's drum kit that was isolated, right? I think we've all heard that.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's what I'm talking about. He goes, that's the kick drum sound I want. I was like, well, yeah, first of all, it's like, overhead mics in some mansion that they recorded this thing.
Totally.
But they didn't mind the 60 hertz and all of that, but what they wanted to kind of, there's a certain impact that Alex would be looking for, that it was a round kick drum, not with that sub bass bump on it that is so typical that we do. You know what I mean?
That's right.
I'm not mixing Van Halen. First thing I do is 60, 80 hertz and give it a kick so I feel it. It's like, but you just can't do that with them.
No, you can't. There was an interesting moment for me when I did that a little bit with them where Eddie pulled me up on the stage and walked me over to the far corner, like almost where Monitor World was.
Yep.
And said, listen to the snare drum. I want it to sound like that with your close mic. You know what I mean? So what he wanted was the snare drum from like 60 feet away.
Exactly.
That's the sound that he wanted. And the kick drum too, he said. So I was like, okay, so everything's close mic'd. I'll try to figure out how to do that, and that's what he was after, which was interesting.
Yeah. I ended up doing a stereo mic way over Alex's drum kit. And cool. I give him just the attack of the drums, cause he liked the sparkle of them. And then I would put some compression on that big stereo overhead and try to make it sound like a John Bonham kit,
Right.
You could never do it out front. I mean, it in his ears.
Yeah.
And then you had the other problems. And all of a sudden, you know, the low end from the PA were coming through the overhead. So it was like,
Yeah.
there's always a balancing act of trying to give an artist what they want, not necessarily just Van Halen, and make it still, you know, sound good out front sometimes, you know?
Totally. Before we run out of time here, because we only have about 15 more minutes.
Oh, wow.
I know, just like flies by. I really want to get into the business side of this and the things that you have learned along the way in your journey, as far as, you know, I know that, what was it, like 2007, I think is when you sold Ultimate Ears, or tell us how that all happened. You built this business to become a huge business, you know. It was in the millions. I don't know what the number is, but and then what happened? Tell us that story.
Well, it all happened kind of on Linkin Park before Tater was there. 2003, the iPod came out, right?
Yep.
So up until that point, we'd been dominant in the professional touring market. And I took a gig, you know, ML goes, "Hey, I got this kind of hip hop band. I need a rap band. I need you to go out with." I'm like, "Who's that?" You know, Linkin
Yeah.
Park. I was like, "Great." So I went and I did that. And then Janet Taylor showed me the iPod. And I was like, I plugged my sevens in there. I was like, wow, that sounds pretty good. So then, you know, after I left Linkin Park, you know, and then I went back and I started working on consumer versions of that, right? And then I thought I needed venture capital, which was the biggest mistake in my life. So basically, I ended up with Vulture Capital, and it's been kind of a trend. When I first started, I was just a sound guy, so it was like, you know, there was a divorce with Westone. There was a kind of a separation between Shure, because I designed the E1 and the E5 for Shure Brothers, you know, in the early days. And Westone and Shure kind of like had a thing, and I got kind of thrown out like a baby with the bathwater. So it was the first time I was like, you know, I was just happy that people liked my stuff, and I was not smart business wise contractually. So I would just basically give things and trust people that in business that I was going to get it back. And I learned to find out, you know, in business, you want to do business with people you like, but you also have to have an exit strategy in case that person isn't there in 6 months. Right. So
Wow.
I learned it on very, very hard, you know, like I had Westone, you know, they didn't understand trademarks, and I had registered Ultimate Ears. Well, they started licensing to my trademark to other labs in Europe. So that's what gave us a divorce. I was like, you can't do that. I own that. They're like, well, you don't know how to manufacture the product. I go, but you don't understand. That's my trademark. That's my registered mark. My brand is Ultimate Ears. You're my OEM lab, right? So I learned the hard way by having things taken away from me. And the first time with Ultimate Ears, you know, the gentleman that I took investment from, Mindy and I, he seemed like a sweetheart of a guy, surfer dude, you know, saved the dolphins, you know, it's like this, you know, Birkenstock and granola, you know, guy, and ended up being a sociopath, you know, Vulture Capital. And I ended up, you know, having my life's work kind of thrown out. You know, I got kind of bounced out of there and minimalized on, you know, on what I got paid. And then, you know, 6 months later, I see that, you know, Logitech bought it for $36 million. And I added up my third. I was like, wow, that would have been a lot more than I got, you know? So, and then I started JH Audio and ended up having to, like, you know, fight to get my non-compete, you know, blown out. So it was a struggle. I mean, I had a special needs daughter. I was bankrupt.
Yeah.
So I was at a total disadvantage, but I learned a lot, you know. And then just recently I had a company come to me and want to acquire the company. And, you know, they were giving me pie in the sky number, and I did 10 months of due diligence. And at the end of it, I said no, because first of all, I didn't want to work with them. Contractually, they could take all my money back. And then, you know, I wanted to always make sure I was part of this company, and they had clauses where they could bounce me at any time. So it just didn't feel right. So I said no, you know. So I guess what I've learned in business is have good attorneys, work with people you want to work with, but make sure that they're okay with the document. And the one thing how I judge a person in business is if you and I sit down and we discuss terms on how we're going to do something, and you're going to be the guy that your attorney is going to give me a document. If that document is more than 10% off of what we discussed, you're dealing with somebody that's out to get you, right? Because I don't know how many times I've sat down with people, struck a deal, and when the document came back, it's nothing like we discussed, right?
Wow.
And you push back, and and then all of a sudden you realize, okay, this who this guy is portraying himself to be is not who he really is, because the legal document will show you who he is.
Wow.
Wow.
And do you think that people
Nice.
get lost in that and get advised by a lawyer, for instance, oh, well, I think we can, get them more, or, we can get more out of them or whatever. There's so many shysters in this business, man. Not only in our business, in the world, you know what I mean? It's crazy. I think that's amazing advice. Is there any other advice you would give to someone that had a startup right now and is trying to, create something even outside of this industry? It's coming from nothing and creating something.
Just the one thing that you have to do, and I've been guilty of it, is there's a few things, but one, you have to keep your eye on the money. There's been a couple times in my career where I've let somebody else handle the money and it's always gone south on me. So make sure you know where you're at. You definitely have to do that. And the other thing is you're going to fail. You're going to get knocked down. You just dust yourself off and learn something from that experience. And I mean, they're all cliche statements, but basically always know about, watch the money, and then watch who you team up with. If you don't need a partner, don't take on a partner, but if you do take on a partner, make it sure, that you have a good exit strategy, and do something. And this is also very cliche. You have, just like you and Tater and everybody that's in the audio or the lighting industry or building monitors, or you have to do something you're passionate about. And if you're passionate about it, the money's just keeping score, because I don't get up every day going, how am I going to make money? What am I going to, I get up every day going, I want to build something really cool that somebody really wants, and also, push technology forward. I mean, and the other thing is realize what you're good at and what you're not good at. I'm horrible at business as far as financial. I mean, I could do basic stuff, but I'm not the guy that wants to be in the trenches and know every percentage and everything. I want to be informed. I want to know what's going on, but I need someone that's better at numbers than me, so I hire that person. I need somebody that's more artistic than me. So if you look at the earpieces we're designing now, they're all very bespoke and very, they're made out of carbon fiber, they're made out of copper, they're made out of cool things. So I hired kids that are very creative. They're young and they're very talented. And they're also, I hired them to do all my 3D stuff, because now we can basically mill shells and stuff, custom shells on CNC machines where we could never do that before. We're the only company that know how to do that. But it's because I had the vision of what I wanted, but I knew I had to hire someone that could actually execute on it. So don't try to do it all. I mean, when you start up, you have to wear 10 hats, but as soon as you can delegate and hire people that have a skill set that you need that you don't have, don't be afraid to bring them on.
It's great advice. Great advice.
And normally we don't get too technical on this show, but hey, we got you here. Let's talk about fit for a second. Let's talk about getting an impression. What is your favorite way of or the JH method of impressions, and why?
Well, I like open mouth impression. So basically, we go past the second bend of the ear canal. I make sure that whenever they're injecting the silicone in your ear, that you have your mouth open, right? But 80% of the population, when you open your mouth, the ear canal expands, right? So, and you also have to make sure that the audiologist uses a good tip pressure. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to put the material on the cotton dam, and then they need to, once they make sure that's not going to go past the dam, they need to make sure that they have a lot of pressure on the tip. So when it fills up the canal, it actually expands as it's coming through the canal. There's no voids in it, right? And then as you get to the end, the other thing that we do is I always pull the earlobe forward a little bit, and I press the material so it expands it in the canal even more, right? And, and do not close your mouth until that stuff sets up, because then when you close your mouth, your canal contracts, and it basically grabs a hold of the earpiece. If you do a closed mouth impression, 80% of the time when you open your mouth, it's going to break the seal, right? So that's really crucial. And make sure that when you look at the impression, that it's all smooth. You don't see any pockets or any wrinkles or anything in it. It should look just like the inside of your ear. It should be, you've seen good impressions. They're very smooth. There's no imperfections in them, right?
And what do you think of the new digital scanning?
I think that it's almost there. You know, as far as the in-ear scanner itself, you know, UE's been doing it for a long time. They've had pretty good results with it. I still think that the best fit is basically a good impression and scan that, then turn it into digital. I don't think they're 100% there yet with the in-ear scanner. You know, I've been in this business since 1995, and they keep telling me it's going to be out in 6 months, right? For all these years.
That's crazy. This is a question that I like to ask a lot, just because it always gets a weird response from some people. If you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't ask you in this hour?
Wow. I think you've done a pretty darn good job so far. What would I have asked?
Well, thank you. What's something that you think you would want to share maybe with, you know, younger guys in this industry, or, you know, talk about the relationships that you've built in this industry and how important they are?
Here's what I would say. If you want to be a live sound engineer or a monitor engineer, or you want to be on a live tour, there's a few things that you have to do. First of all, you have to we've touched on this, you have to work harder than anyone else out on the tour. You have to be noticed, especially if you're a young roadie. Don't act like you know everything, because there's guys like Pooch and Tater and the Gungies of the world that are very happy to share their knowledge with you. And so be a sponge. Know that you don't know what you don't know, and be a person that people want to hang out with, because you're living on a 40-foot tennis shoe with 10 guys, and whoever's in that front lounge and that back lounge, you have to be able to be part of the team, and people have to like you being around them. And that's the other way that you get a job in this business, is that it's word of mouth in this business. And if you're not a nice person, or you have some tendencies that rubs people the wrong way, you won't work long in this business, because you have to fit in and be part of the puzzle. And also, never have the production manager ever worry about if you're doing your job or not, because production managers want to hire people that they don't have to micromanage, that are on top of their game, So those are the things that I would say to a young up and coming roadie, And I think I discussed this off the line with you guys. For me, sometimes you have to put in extra time to learn things. I never was taught sound theory. And there was a gentleman, his name's Dave Lawler, and he taught me how to analyze PA systems with FFT analyzer. Started with the SIM, turned into the SMART. And if it wasn't for him teaching me how sound reflections, when they come back in, create comb filters, how you can shade a PA system where you don't have to add a bunch of low end into the front fills, because you're going to get the low end off the side of the PA, the main hang, how to time align that. And then show me what phase was, because so many people don't understand phase. They think it's smoke and mirrors. Phase is real. It's your friend or it's not your friend, right? Time align, all of that stuff. But the reason that Ultimate Ears was successful and JH Audio is successful is because one person would spend time with me and let me hang out while he was tuning to PA, and he taught me all of those things. And I just took that stuff that he taught me for PA systems, applied it to when I was doing monitors, then I applied it to designing my in-ear monitors. So, and everybody kind of shunned him. Everybody thought he was kind of geeky, right? Because he wasn't like the hardcore rock and roll roadie, but he was super smart. And he was a great guy, and I owe a lot to that guy.
Fantastic.
So
yeah, it's amazing.
Keep an eye out for a mentor, because you need them.
Yeah. Let's get into, I know we're running short on time, but I want to get one more thing in on the main broadcast here. Anything new you can tell us about? And quickly, let's get into testing IEMs, test kits on the road, having traces, because nobody's ever been doing that. We're starting to see it a bit. What are your feelings on it?
All right. I'm a huge, huge fan of people having ear simulators, smart, and being able to diagnose or do compensation EQ or whatever on an in-ear monitor, right? On Guns N' Roses, they have 2 Gras ear simulators, and basically they use smart. You use a Gras ear simulator in place of the analyzer mic. You make sure you get a good seal. You set your time. You can look at your phase. You can look at your frequency response. You can give it a birth certificate, and you can check it every aspect of that earpiece. If it needs to be repaired, you can tell me, hey, we've got a problem here. But the main thing is that in this day and age, 90% of the people use in-ear monitors, and 90% of the monitor engineers are handing people earpieces that they don't know are working properly. There's only one way to test them. You need an ear simulator, the Grasso. I mean, you guys can hit us an email. We'll put you in. We don't sell them, but I can put you in the direction. Every sound company should have this rig that they should be able to give to their monitor engineer to take out. So the Clairs, these companies really need to invest in ear simulators for their smart rig. Every front of house guy has an analyzer mic and a smart rig. Why doesn't the monitor guy have a smart rig with an ear simulator when the whole show is reliant on those earpieces in that pop star's head, right? So I'm a huge proponent.
And with just years of experience, I find, a lot of the issues come from, which is hard to stop, is from you delivering those things to the dressing room and from sitting in the dressing room to them putting them on. So, you want to be 100% positive you gave them 100% working product and you left in that dressing room till they put them on, or you went and fitted them on for them. I can't agree with that enough.
And there's no way of doing it unless you have an ear simulator.
That's right.
Yeah, gone are the days of you just like barely tucking someone's. I think it's working.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
You could do it with a two-way earpiece, low, high. Yeah, they both work. Okay, we're good to go, right? But nowadays with multi-drivers,
the multi-drivers, you just can't. So what about anything new? Is there anything new, exciting? Maybe you can't tell us exactly, but what's the future?
Well, the future's basically IEM processing, because we've done every speaker, every headphone, every monitor has to have some sort of equalization and some tuning. Nothing comes out of the box. It's better. Okay, let me back up. The sound systems and the monitors systems these days are done pretty good at the factory, but you still have to tune them, right? And there's no passive EQ system out there that's, if it's not actively controlled or DSP controlled, it needs some work. And that goes with any ear monitor. I mean, I get about 70, 80% of I can out of these ear monitors, but you have to actually throw a little post EQ on these things sometimes. I mean, if there's a 120 Hertz, it's bugging you. Well, just like a PA system, take it out, but where we're going in the future, in the near future, and I'm hoping that by the first quarter of next year, we'll have some miniature IEM processors. So basically active three-way processing, just like a Lake processor that we use on, 19-inch rack space, but size of a belt pack. So basically, it basically attaches to the belt pack. It doesn't make it 2 belt packs. It's about 8 millimeters thick, has a jumper wire, 192K resolution. You can offset for hearing loss. You can make every earpiece perfect. You can also make the earpieces super small, because now I don't have to add an inch of tubing on the high driver to make it in time with the low driver. I can basically, with a keystroke, put it in. We're talking hundreds of milliseconds, but hundreds of milliseconds still an inch in an ear monitor. So we can put all the components in time and make the earpieces, 60% smaller, because I don't have to have all the plumbing in there. So things are.
I know the ladies will like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the ladies will like it. And then if you don't like the way something sounds, flash it, change it. You'll have complete control over the earpiece, and that's next year. We're teaming up with a very, very solid company. So, the co-brand's going to be very solid. I'm letting the cat out of the bag a little bit, but this is where we're heading, and I'm 3 years into this project.
That's awesome. I hate taking up all your time, but I just think it's pertinent questions. We normally don't get technical, but I want to ask this we've had a great relationship for years. And one thing I don't think that's out there enough is, and I don't want this to be me kissing JH's butt kind of thing, but, JH does have monitor
facing the wrong direction.
JH does have monitor engineers on the staff. I don't know if any other company can say that, but something you've pushed and not a lot of people know is getting your artist ears checked. And if there is hearing loss or if there's a problem on one ear and not the other, go to Jerry. He can fix that. He has a solution for you on that, right?
Yeah, we've done some pretty dramatic curves to offset hearing loss. Very, very famous singer. I can't tell him his name, but his left ear was from guitar rig was so much worse than his right ear. So I worked with the monitor engineer, and I basically built a set of hot rodded sevens. I doubled up the highs, and I basically made them super, super bright. And I put an attenuator on it and it turned the bottom end down. But I had to actually shift the imaging to the left ear because it was so bad. So I basically had his hearing curve, and I put it on the ear simulator, and I basically did a compensation EQ curve for left and for right, and told him where exactly to put the attenuator on the lows. And basically he popped them in, and it was like the first time the guy heard it straight up center, and it worked great. But it took the combination of building a really bright circuit that was very powerful, being able to adjust the attenuation of the bass to center it up, and then to actually have the power of the digital console where I gave him the recipe and he put it in the parametric EQ that basically shaped it for the guy. And the guy did, you know, one of the biggest tours in the world, and it made the guy happy. So those are the kinds of things that we will do. We'll do everything that's possible. And now that we're going to be doing DSP, we'll be able to do it so much easier, you know?
Yeah. Don't just guess. There's help out there if you need it.
Yeah. And you also bring up a really good point. There are thousands of people in this industry that don't get their hearing checked. And I just look at them and go, you know, I get my hearing checked on the regular about once a year, just because I want to track to make sure that I'm not hurting myself. You know, I want to see if there's a trend happening, you know. And if there is, you know, I work pretty hard on protecting myself outside of the 90 minutes that I mix, or 2 hours that I mix every day. Outside of that, I have 4 pairs of JH earplugs because I keep them in every pocket, you know, of everything.
I wear earplugs all day during load in, load out, because that seems to be the noise that really affects me. Not the show. It's the peripheral noise of the load in and load out.
Yeah. I think most of my damage, you know, I've got some loss and some ringing, and that was because I was standing behind sub bass before in ears with a wedge, trying to get a Q wedge over to sub bass. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, and that's how it happens. So if there's anything, like you said, get your hearing tested, always have your earplugs. Don't get off the bus without your earplugs or whatever. You got to protect your hearing, because I'm 60 years old and it's starting to come now. You know, I still hear tonality and everything, but you know, I have an 8K pitch. It never goes away, you know, and it's just because of proximity and just years of sound exposure before I was smart enough to put earplugs in. You know, I was a kid. I was 18 years old. What are you talking? I'm invincible.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, I always say this, you know, I talk to these guys. I've been in the business 800 years and my ears are perfect. I'm thinking, if your ears are perfect and you've been in this business 10 years, you're lying. So, you know, there is a little bit of heart, you know, maybe less now than there was back then, but if you've been doing it for a while, you're going to have some issues. Just get yourself checked and keep on top of it.
Well, and the other thing is, especially if you're a front of house engineer, you know, you want to know where that notch is, because you don't want to keep adding 4K to something. That's right. When it doesn't need it. You know, you're like, oh, okay, I got a little notch here. That's right. You know, maybe I'm going to take this down a little bit, let it sound a little bit dull to me, because of the audience, you know, they haven't been mixing for the past 6 months, right? They walk in fresh, right? Yeah. This is my 12th week of this leg, and I've been doing this 5 nights a week, you know, so you have to.
I mean, I know I have a small little dip at 2K in my right ear, and I know that's from a Q wedge. I know that you know, from when I was younger, it's from a Q wedge. And it actually causes, at that specific frequency, it causes a little bit of an image shift for me, just a tiny. And so I force myself a lot to like, nope, I know that's in the center. I know it's not like right here. And so, you know, I mean, listen, that's part of mixing for 30 years, you know.
Yeah, it's just going to happen. You just got to watch your trend.
Yeah, that's it. Well, listen, hey, Jerry, thank you so much for giving your time and coming to talk to us, and your journey is unbelievable. I've just copied a bunch. There's been a bunch of people that have left some questions here. So we're going to go to our Q&A section here for about another 30 minutes and try to answer some of that.
All right.
And so guys, we'll post that in the next couple of days. Thank you so much for coming, Jerry. We really appreciate it.
That was a lot of fun. It's great chatting with you guys, man.
Yeah,
I feel
man,
like
it
I'm
always
hanging
is.
in the
It always
back
is.
lounge of a bus.
Yeah, it totally is. It's always,
The back
you always
cave.
have great stories. And we didn't get to some of the, some of the things we can't say publicly,
Yeah.
but let's just say that. But
Yep.
yeah, it's good times. Hey guys, next week is Ethan Murphy. Ethan is a stage manager, rigger, carpenter, and production manager that has worked in the industry since 1991. He's been hanging around backstage at concerts since he was 6 years old because his stepfather is Fred Saunders, who is personal security and head of security for some of the biggest acts in the business. Ethan has worked for Alanis Morissette, Backstreet Boys, Avenged Sevenfold, Slipknot, Halsey, Disturbed, Pentatonics, Gorillaz, Kygo, and Linkin Park. We look forward to speaking with our good friend next week. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our videos. We have just passed 1,000 subscribers to our channel, and we are very grateful that you have helped us to reach this milestone. Thank you. Keep telling all your friends, subscribe, and smash like on all our videos, please. We sure do appreciate it. And also, we are still trying to get our elected officials to listen to us about Restart and include it in the debated current stimulus package. Right now, we are collateral damage. In other words, our pleas to help are being unheard. We are a dead industry right now. Unlike other industries, we have no jobs to apply for. For some, unemployment is the only thing keeping us from selling our homes and living on the streets. We need funding to keep the 12 million people in the live event industry afloat. Many of us are independent contractors or we own small businesses that have not had income since March. We need help. Please go to extendpua.org, wemakeevents.org, NAMM.org, and for help with mental health and well-being, theroadieclinic.com for more information on how you can help. Contact your local representatives in the House and Senate to remind them about our forgotten industry and to include Restart Act in the stimulus package. Send those emails. Without skilled workers like Tater, myself, and Jerry, there will be no live shows when we are allowed to gather again. So thank you for the support. If you're here and you're not in the industry, do what you can to help us. Nobody's listening to us right now. We need your help. All right, guys, thanks very much. Jerry, thank you. And we'll see you next week on Wrong End of the Snake.